I'm John McKee, editor of Messianic Apologetics. Messianicapologetics.net. And I would like to welcome you to this episode of Messianic Insider, your theology and news roundup for June the 25th, 2025. Two brief housekeeping points before we get started. The first one is I am relieved to say that the news cycle has died down a bit from the past week and a half since the Israel-Iran conflict started. That doesn't mean that there are not going to be further things which come out, more developments we have to pay attention to. But at least for, I suspect, the next few weeks, things are going to slow down in that department. That we still have to pray for peace. We still have to pray for the protection of Israel, the Jewish community, the Messianic Jewish community. Pray for the people of Iran. Pray for our U.S. servicemen and women, those of our allies. The dust still hasn't fully settled yet, but we'll certainly continue to see how that unfolds. Also, we only have 2 episodes of Messianic Insider left, today and tomorrow, before we will be leaving for the Messiah 2025 conference. Next week at this time, I will have just given my presentation. And it's my intention during the time we are away to provide you with an editor's daily log, McKee Moments. That's what we did last year. And you can keep up with our journeys, our interactions, some of the reflections, and we'll see how the Lord has me tie in any current events or news. But this is the largest Messianic conference in the world. It's the one major ministry thing we go to, and you all have definitely seen what we've done in years past. All right, so starting off with our theology roundup. Please go with me to the Messianic Apologetics website, messianicapologetics.net. Click on the FAQs tab and go down to the letter F. These are all in alphabetical order. And here, click on the entry Final Generation, and a PDF file will open up. This is something which is getting a lot of traction right now in various circles, particularly among those who are critical of dispensationalism and or a premillennial eschatology, the idea that the Messiah returns before the 1,000-year millennium. Likewise, questions about, are we, those of us living today, or at least those who have witnessed the rebirth of the state of Israel in 1948, are we the final generation? So this is something we have to talk about today, especially with all of the discussion and speculation which has arisen from the recent Israel-Iran conflict. Our question, do you believe we are the final generation? Okay, and that's a pretty reasonable question. Everyone has asked that at some point or another. It is commonly asserted among many Messianic believers, and for that matter, many evangelical Protestants also, that our generation living today in the early to mid 21st century has to be the final generation. This is often based on the following statement by Yeshua delivered during his Olivet Discourse on the end times, where he said, "Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place." Matthew 24:34, New American Standard. Also, Mark 13:30, Luke 21:32. So, based on a straightforward English translation like this, many conclude that we are the final generation. Now, a common claim which is made, especially in some distinct Messianic circles, is that the final generation started in 1967 with the recapturing of the old city of Jerusalem by Israeli forces. Given that the Exodus generation died out in 40 years, Numbers 32:13, Psalm 95:10, it is assumed that within a period of about 40 years that the end times and second coming must be upon us. By the year 2007 or so, which was how long ago? 18 years ago now, this spurred on a great deal of end time speculation and prognostication, with many claiming that the world as we know it was coming to an end at breakneck speed. Certain teachers took advantage of the paranoia and capitalized upon it in more ways than just drawing attention to themselves. Interestingly enough, there are three major ways or interpretations of Yeshua's words which exist. And of course, people thinking Old City recaptured in 1967, this generation 40 years. So by 2007, presumably the Messiah will have returned or will be starting the 70th week of Daniel, the Great Tribulation, something like that. That was 18 years ago. So how else can this statement be interpreted? Okay, three major interpretations. Number one, the Lord said, "This generation will not pass away," and was referring to the generation which lived during the time when he declared these words. Preterists, who believe that the end times actually took place during the 1st century CE and consider the anti-Messiah Antichrist of Revelation to be Nero Caesar, are among the most common advocates of this view. Number two, the Lord said, "This generation will not pass away," and was speaking of a future group of people who would be those to witness all of the events prior to his return. While it is easy to associate this generation with those who have witnessed the rebirth of the state of Israel in the Middle East, there is no scriptural indication to specifically pinpoint when this generation actually began. Yeshua's two-verse parable of the fig tree is hardly enough to equate the reestablishment of Israel as being the catalyst which began the final generation. Matthew 24, 32 to 33, Mark 13, 28 and 29, Luke 21, 29 and 30, especially when Israel in Scripture is more commonly associated with the olive tree. And number three, pay attention very closely to this. When the Lord referred to what the Greek source text referred to as he genea aute, which in most Bibles is rendered as this generation, he was referring to something else. As should be noted, genea has a variety of possible renderings, including race, stock, family, and a race, generation, from the Liddell Scott lexicon. Yeshua's words need not be interpreted regarding a specific generation in time, which he either spoke to in the past or would be speaking to in the future, but rather an ethnic group of people which will have survived long enough into the future to be present to experience the end times. Of the three options considered, that Yeshua was actually referring to this race will not pass away is one which today's Messianic community needs to take very seriously. The Ryrie Study Bible actually confirms these conclusions, remarking, quote, "No one living when Jesus spoke these words lived to see all these things come to pass. However, the Greek word can mean race or family, which makes good sense here, i.e., the Jewish race will be preserved in spite of terrible persecution until the Lord comes." Unquote. From the Ryrie Study Bible. The Complete Jewish Study Bible from 2016 notably renders Matthew 24:34 along these lines. "Yes, I tell you that this people will certainly not pass away before all these things happen." Matthew 24:34, Complete Jewish Study Bible. While many Messianic people today believe that they are the final generation, it seems very unlikely that Yeshua will be able to return soon, given the current theological and spiritual condition of the Messianic movement. For a movement which often believes it has the answers, yet still largely does not even have a basic theology about God and matters of human existence, among other things, much is going to have to improve. Likewise, if today's Messianic movement truly did believe it were living in the final generation, then we would see far more attention dedicated to not only spreading the good news and seeing people repent of their sins, but we would also be preparing people physically and, more important, psychologically for the effects of the Great Tribulation. It seems that the arguments in favor of us living in the final generation are delivered more to draw attention to various quote-unquote prophetic ministries and sell products than realistically developing a well-reasoned eschatology. None of us should try to force God's hand regarding the fulfillment of prophecy, but rather do all that we can to provide for a sustainable future for today's Messianic community. We should be about the Lord's work, truly equipping Messianic believers for the challenges of today so that they can be prepared for the challenges of tomorrow, which may include the Great Tribulation. But in order to be more prepared, there is an entire array of theological issues which needs to be considered, which most of the Messianic movement since 1967 has avoided. And whether these issues have been avoided purposefully or not is hard to determine. If anything, it is time for us to no longer avoid those issues. All right, so when somebody tells you that this generation will not pass away, and they conclude that, well, that started in 1948, perhaps, more likely 1967 with the retaking of Jerusalem, and then you wonder, okay, well, how long is that generation? Is it 40 years? Well, 2007 has come and gone. Was it 50 years? 2017 has come and gone. Was it 80 years? The other interpretation which needs to be seriously considered is not this generation will not pass away, but rather taking into account Ganea, this race will not pass away. Speaking of how God will supernaturally preserve and protect the Jewish people. That's something which needs to be considered because rather than wanting to crunch numbers and try to calculate the time of Yeshua's return, Yeshua in his Olivet Discourse explicitly provides direction regarding watching socio-religious political signs, which is by far much more difficult. But it is one of the reasons why we have Messianic Insider. So as part of our ongoing conversation, we can monitor what goes on in the world, socially, religiously, and politically. All right, so let's continue toward our news roundup. We do the news roundup after the theology roundup because everything we discuss is time sensitive. That's certainly been true of the past several weeks with the Israel-Iran conflict, what is now being called the 12-day war. Of course, there's continue going to be a lot of speculation, a lot of discussion about what this means, what it doesn't mean, how much information do we presently not have, how much is going to be revealed in the coming days, we don't know. But I encourage people to stay grounded. God is in control. Do not speak presumptuously like so many people in the 1980s, 1990s, and the turn of the millennium did, as is frequently witnessed throughout religious history. People only can discern whether or not specific prophecies have been fulfilled after the fact. But I learned from a lot of the false predictions and prognostications around the turn of the millennium to be tactful and very reserved with my words, lest I get accused of speaking presumptuously. We can all have opinions, but be very careful with what you say at this time. We need to pay attention, but we don't need to be caught saying something which we later have to retract. All right, so let's get into some of the news. All of the links will be available on MessianicApologetics.net later today when this episode is archived. You can go read the articles, watch the different clips, whatever. All right, so we're starting with a post on X by Mike Vlach. He is a dispensational theologian. He's written a number of books. I have some of them in my own library. At present, you're seeing on social media a lot of criticism of dispensational theology. Now, I'm not a dispensationalist. Dispensationalism is principally known for adhering to a widespread separation between Israel and the church, advocating that God has two groups of elect. It absolutely believes that God is not finished with Israel. Israel's been temporarily put off to the side. Most dispensationalists believe in a pre-tribulation rapture, and following the rapture, God will resume his program with Israel. The 70th week of Israel, or tribulation period, will begin. Dispensationalists do strongly support the state of Israel. They tend to strongly support the Messianic Jewish movement. There are a lot of people in Messianic Judaism who are dispensational. There are many who are not, like myself. But here, Mike Vlach, we don't have to disagree with everything in dispensationalism, but he says essential beliefs of dispensationalism: consistent literal interpretation. Okay, that's an opinion, but okay, they try to be literal. All covenant dimensions fulfilled literally. Okay, so if God makes a covenant with Israel, for example, we're not going to try to super spiritualize it as some other traditions do. Ongoing role of national Israel. Okay, we would agree with that. Church is New Testament entity. Israel does not equal the church. There are people in the Messianic community who would agree with that. Others would adhere to different models of ecclesiology. All believers are a part of the Commonwealth of Israel. James attested at the Jerusalem Council that the tabernacle of David was being restored, which, if you look at Acts 15 and Amos 9, 11, and 12, depicts a restored 12 tribes of Israel at the center of God's plan and enlarged borders to welcome in the righteous from the nations. So this would be an area where many Messianics would disagree. Futurism, okay, but that doesn't necessarily require somebody to be a dispensationalist. Premillennialism doesn't require somebody to be a dispensationalist. Nations retain future significance. Okay, some of that involves what's going to take place in the millennium. We know that humanity doesn't all get amalgamated into being the same. There are going to be distinct ethnic groups in the millennium. People living outside the land of Israel, they have to come to Jerusalem every year to honor the Feast of Tabernacles, otherwise they won't get rain. That's in Zechariah. whether those are independent political states or ethnic groups which submit to the rule of King Messiah, that's another discussion. But there are a lot of people out there who don't like the influence dispensationalism has had politically on the United States and its seemingly unwavering support for Israel. But we are going to have to talk about dispensationalism in more detail in the future. And along with that, supersessionism, replacement theology. Some of you have also likely heard the label fulfillment theology thrown around. So that's something to just keep in mind. All right. Getting more into the news. This is from the New York Post yesterday, June the 24th. The head of the United Nations Nuclear Watchdog Group revealed even more damage from the U.S. airstrikes on Iran's nuclear sites after taking a closer look, including possible chemical contamination at one facility. We don't have all the information regarding the aftermath of the bombings over the weekend, and we're probably not going to have all of it. That's in the realm of confidential and classified, but you are going to hear conflicting reports. This says even more damage than what was initially reported as present. You've got other news sources saying, well, there really wasn't a lot of damage. Also from Instagram, Newsmax yesterday, June the 24th, with the final post-ceasefire volleys having been flushed out after stern warnings, harsh language, and a phone call aboard Air Force One, President Donald Trump is taking another bow on having temporarily de-escalated heightened tensions in the Middle East. The headline being, Trump, great honor to destroy Iran nuke sites, stop the war. From the Times of Israel yesterday, June the 24th, the headline, Netanyahu said weighing snap elections in light of popular Iran offensive. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his inner circle are weighing snap elections in light of Israel's offensive against Iran, which won widespread support among the public and has been broadly seen as a success, according to a Monday night report. This is not something uncommon for different parliamentary democracies to do when there has been some kind of a big positive thing which has taken place. Now, military victory would be an obvious one, but the economy's doing well. Something really positive has happened in the country for the parliament to dissolve and for there to be snap elections, so the government in power can be returned with a greater majority. This is something, if you'll rewind back to the 1980s, this is something which Margaret Thatcher did after the Falkland Islands War. The Conservative Party was polling very, very low. In fact, it was expected or anticipated that there wouldn't be a Labour government replacing the Conservatives, but rather the SDP Liberal Alliance replacing the Conservatives. The Social Democratic Party Liberal Alliance. Falkland Islands War, massive British victory, an election, and the Conservatives are returned to power. So this is not something uncommon in a parliamentary system. We'll see if they go through with it. All right, I thought this analysis of what just took place was good. It's from Andrew Freeman. Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech following the conclusion of Operation Rising Lion. It appears that Iran's nuclear program and missile production may have been a major roadblock for Netanyahu's support of President Trump's deal of the millennium. Now that they've been dealt with, all indications are that it's game on. And for what it's worth, the tagline of this movement is quickly becoming peace and prosperity. Okay, so from this, Iran's nuclear program seemingly neutralized, Trump's agenda with the Abraham Accords, peace through strength and commerce, peace and prosperity, that's something that we're going to be hearing more and more about, seemingly. With the elimination of Iran's evil axis, We will open an axis of peace and prosperity for the peoples of the region. We are already working on this vigorously, and the time will come to reveal our actions. From Fox News, June the 24th, yesterday, Trump nominated for Nobel Peace Prize over Iran-Israel ceasefire deal. Representative Buddy Carter credits President Donald Trump with preventing Iran from obtaining most lethal weapon on the planet. And we already know that Pakistan has nominated him for a Nobel Peace Prize as well. Will he get it? I don't know. From the X channel, critical threats. Here you've got some maps here. You can go look at this in greater detail on your own. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stated that Operation Rising Lion achieved all of Israel's war aims and much more. The latest update from Critical Threats in the Study of War surveys the objectives of Israel's 2-week air campaign and the current state of play. And of course, we don't have all the information. We probably never will. That's the nature of war. That's the nature of what is for public consumption and for what is confidential and what's classified. But a lot did happen, and it will continue to be, we'll continue to watch, and this will continue to be analyzed, dissected, and commented upon for many years. The so-called 12-day war, as it's being discussed. From I-24 News English, this is from yesterday, surreal to watch. The scope of Israel's operations in Iran and the degree of its domination have been stunning, retired CENTCOM commander and 4-star general Joseph Votel tells Nicole Zedek. All right, back to the American homeland. This is something which has many people upset. Many people are disturbed. There was a mayoral primary held yesterday in New York City. So this is from Newsmax. This is one of the first ones which came across my feed. Former Governor Andrew Cuomo conceded New York City's Democratic mayoral primary to Zohran Mamdani. And this is someone who has said things about the Israel-Hamas situation. He has said things about Intifada. He is a Muslim. He is a socialist. Many of people consider him a radical. And of course, what makes this really significant for the Jewish community is that New York has the largest Jewish community outside of Israel. And a lot of people are encouraging members of the Jewish community, it's time to leave New York. You either need to move to Israel or you need to move to somewhere else in America, another state which is far more conservative, far more friendly to Israel, with the major candidate being, of course, the state of Florida. People have also floated out the state of Texas as well, which is pro-Israel. For our purposes in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, we've definitely seen a lot of people over the years from northern states, so New York, New Jersey, Illinois, where you have a lot of, strong Democratic control, a lot of the corruption, what have you. Also, just the high taxes, the economy, they have definitely moved into our area. So we've got to pay attention to this, because if we see an influx of Jewish people from a place like New York, how is that going to affect Messianic Jewish outreach and evangelism? That's something we're going to have to sort through locally. It'll be interesting to see. I-24 News English. This is from yesterday, and this concerns the ceasefire or lack thereof set in place by President Trump. The standard operating procedure for ceasefires in the Mideast is that the deal is made, and then, in the time before it takes effect, both sides get their last shots in. Mike Wagenheim tells the Emily Francis, okay, she's the commentator, Trump was likely caught unawares by a peculiar regional convention. Possibly, maybe not. But I did think that was important to pass on. Okay, we don't have as much news as we did yesterday. This is a shorter episode. Here was an interesting post which came across X. I thought we should pass along because of the subject matter of anti-Semitism. Now, this is a chart. This is obviously someone's opinion, but it offers some good things to keep in mind. You've got the two categories of overt anti-Semitism, socially unacceptable, and then covert anti-Semitism, socially acceptable. And, this in like the overt anti-Semitism category is things like Nazis, KKK swastikas, Holocaust denial, synagogue shootings. The covert anti-Semitism is things like Jews have too much power. Jews should go back to Europe. Jews control Hollywood. Jews control the media. All Jews are rich. They're not oppressed. And the one which probably concerns us the most, Jews killed Jesus. Now, there are people out there in the Messianic community, if you offer any criticism of the state of Israel or any criticism of the Jewish religion, you're anti-Semitic. So my advice for all of us, if you have criticism of the state of Israel or you have criticism of Judaism as a religion, make sure it is targeted and make sure it is on a top shelf issue. So the kinds of things you see in Hebrew roots, like, well, Judaism doesn't use the divine name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, or they use a different calendar. That's BS. Make sure it is on something which is directly affected by the good news. Make sure it's something directly affected by salvation history and whether or not some of the Jewish people you encounter are accelerating or deterring it, among other things. Okay, this was something interesting that came across my X feed from Stephen Anglis, senior pastor in Western Washington. Okay, somebody who went to Moody and Master's Seminary, so probably dispensational in his theology. He says, if you're a dispensationalist and you're basing your beliefs on, number one, what you see in the news, number two, your opinion of Israel or the Jews, number three, Christian sci-fi novels, you're doing it wrong. Shape your views about the final days on the final authority of God's word alone. There are people who are dispensationalists who became dispensationalists on the basis of their reading of Holy Scripture. We might disagree with it, but this at least is to be partially commended. That's where the battle resides. That's where the discussions reside. How do we sort through this? How do we sort through that? There are a lot of people who believe that dispensationalism has gotten some things wrong. I am one of those people. Has it gotten everything wrong? We'll continue to have that discussion. From I-24 News English, yesterday evening, the idea that if Israel freezes its operations in Gaza is an open-ended manner, then Hamas won't just solidify its rule and rebuild its terror fortress is pure fantasy. Yeah, now with the Iran conflict largely concluded, or seemingly concluded, we don't know. The attention is likely to focus back on what was taking place in Gaza, and hopefully we'll see a quick solution required now. I mean, it's obvious enough the United States is not going to get involved like it did in Iran, but this is a situation which has been taking place since October of 2023. It needs to be resolved. This is something that came across my feed. I thought I'd share with you because of the ongoing conversation we're going to have discussion about dispensationalism. It's both its positive as well as its negative impact on the Messianic community. From Timothy Decker, who is a peculiar Baptist patriarch, pastor, professor. He's someone who you look into him, was once a dispensationalist. Dispensationalism can't handle this. Hebrews 3:5 says Moses is a servant of the house. Okay, that's the house of God. Hebrews 3:6 says Christ is the son or heir, and we are in the same house by holding fast to Christ our hope. Okay, the house of God, Moses is a servant, the Messiah is the son or the heir. And as the redeemed, we're all part of that house. Now, this is where things get interesting. So the conclusion drawn is the church is Israel. Okay, that's a supersessionist or a replacement theology conclusion. Messianics, not everyone perhaps, but Messianics like myself would conclude, well, Jewish believers in Israel's Messiah, they were part of the house, right? The household of God, the household of faith, the house of Israel. They obviously stay part of that house. Using an analogy like the wild branches grafted into the olive tree, it means that non-Jewish believers in Israel's Messiah get incorporated into that community as well, but they are by no means to displace, dismiss, or disregard those who are naturally a part of that house, the natural branches. That's my take on it. It doesn't mean that the church is Israel. It means that non-Jewish people get incorporated into the Messianic kingdom realm of Israel. And it doesn't mean that God's promises to the ethnic descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob disappear. All right, this is from Open Source Intel yesterday. National Security Advisor Zaki Hanegbi, that's Israeli, confirmed during a closed session of the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee last Sunday. There is a direct daily dialogue at all levels between Israel and the regime in Syria under Abu Shara al-Julani. I'm leading it with political elements there. Hanegbi added that Syria and Lebanon are potential candidates for the Abraham Accords. Okay, so with the Israel-Iran conflict seemingly concluded, it's never going to completely go away. Attention is going to be now focused on Gaza and focused on the Abraham Accords. Are we going to see Syria, Lebanon, other countries join in? And then finally, and this is from End Time Headlines today, Donald Trump recently posted that we are finally entering our golden age of peace, prosperity, and security following the bombing of Iran and the call for ceasefire between the two nations. Okay, so a lot of discussion, of course, a lot of opinions regarding what Donald Trump has meant by us entering into a golden age. Are we going to see fiscal responsibility, reduction of the national debt, a boom to the American economy and the global economic order? Or is Donald Trump paving the way for the arrival of the beast? In fact, he may even be the beast. We continue to wait and see. There are a lot of strong opinions regarding what could or what may not happen. All right, so that concludes our news roundup for today. Of course, right now, a lot of our attention as a family and as a ministry is being focused on getting packed up for and ready to leave for the Messiah 2025 conference. So please do keep us in your prayers for traveling safety, for a good time, that we're maybe even able to decompress and get a little bit of rest, even though this is hardly a vacation. And as I said, I'm going to be keeping you up to date on Messiah 2025 through different editor's log, McKee moment daily posts. So there's not going to be Messianic Insider, but we are going to have Messianic Insider tomorrow. As always, on behalf of Outreach Israel Ministries and Messianic Apologetics, I would like to sincerely thank you for your ongoing prayers, encouragement, and donations toward all of our ministry efforts. You can give online at outreachisrael.net/support. We'll see you again tomorrow with another episode of Messianic Insider. Until then, may God bless you, shalom, and take care.